We finally see a doctor who calls us up in the morning and says, I found something. And at that point, being in prevention, I was a researcher. This is now around 2018. Um, I look up, he comes and he says, I think I found something. And he talks about this syndrome that started in New Zealand with chronic users of marijuana. And there were literally hundreds of studies. And so I brought it into my prevention work as a prevention educator in my county because marijuana was now, being talked about becoming legalized, was becoming more prominent, was legalized in Colorado and a few other states at that point, and it was going to happen in New York. So it's really interesting to me that this has been around for quite some time, but nobody was talking about it. And now, because marijuana is legalized, everybody is talking about it. There are hundreds of cases on a daily basis across this country of CHS. That is what emergency rooms are seeing most. And Karen Randall just talked about that. Dr. Karen Randall actually just mentioned that.
You're listening to When God Intervenes, the podcast where faith, hope, and healing come together for families with a loved one battling addiction. Hey everybody, I'm back with Crissy Groenewegen and Bronwen Skinner. They're with the Parents Action Network, and I've known both of them for a little while, and we've done a little bit of work together, and I want to introduce them now. Crissy serves as the director of the Parent Action Network. She comes from a counseling, education, and prevention background and has spent the last 5 years as a community prevention educator, coalition coordinator, and director of a small nonprofit agency dedicated to preventing youth initiation into substance use and misuse. She is a skilled prevention specialist experienced at building the capacity of small grassroots community groups and movements. She is passionate about making a difference in our communities and working to make our neighborhoods safe for youth and families. The decision to take on this role comes from a place of great respect for the advocacy work that Sam, and that's Smart Approaches to Marijuana, does. She shares Sam's mission and vision of creating a network of parents and families who will be able to tell their stories and in turn educate lawmakers and advocate for safe policies surrounding the issue of legalized marijuana and the dangers of the new high-potency THC analogs. Crissy is the mother of 3 adult children and lives in Dutchess County, New York, with her husband, their 2 dogs, and 2 cats. Thank you for being here, Crissy. And now I need to introduce your cohort, your co-worker, Bronwen. Bronwen Skinner comes to Parent Action Network after 15 years of serving in children's, youth, and women's ministries. She is a mom with a story, as well as project coordinator for PAN, bringing the perspective of a parent who has been through trying to find support and treatment for cannabis use disorder while marijuana was marketed as harmless. She left Colorado with her family after 13 years and now resides in Texas with her husband, a probation officer. Bronwen has a BS in theater, English, psychology, and an MA in biblical counseling and has worked as a volunteer for restorative justice programs, a local school for at-risk youth, as well as donating counseling time for single mothers. All right, welcome, Crissy and Bronwen. I'm glad to have you with me today. And let's just start off a little bit talking about PAN. We heard a little bit about what brought you to PAN. If you want to add anything to that, feel free to do that. And then just tell us a little bit more about what PAN does and how it can help parents out there.
So I think I'll start off and then Bronwen can kind of chime in because I came to PAN, as I said, as having an existing relationship with Smart Approaches to Marijuana in the prevention work I was doing. But there were some kinks in the road when PAN became an idea for Kevin Sabet, our CEO. And Bronwen was there since the beginning and the inception of Parent Action Network. So she she was part of the very beginnings of SAM, and there were some kinks in the road. And so by the point that I was brought in, they were about 9 months into trying to figure out how exactly to execute this really great idea. And the great idea was that after hearing so many stories, Kevin would hear story after story from a parent or family member who was just sharing the same kind of stories as the last one, talking about, my kid is using marijuana or my family member is using marijuana and there's something wrong here, and he had this great vision to create this network of parents that could share these stories and use their voices to make changes in legislation. But sometimes great ideas don't pan out very well when you can't figure out how to execute it. So, that's where I came in. Kevin and I had a past relationship. He knew my strengths, as you stated in my bio. And so while it took a good 6 months, we started to figure it out and what the best plan of action would be. And this is where Bronwen can chime in, because she has been instrumental in being the past voice of PAN. And quite honestly, I call her I'm not going to use names, but certain person's whisperer, because she just knows the inner workings of the beginnings, what didn't work. So sometimes, for instance, I'll say, well, maybe we should do this. And she'll say, that didn't work. Let's not do that. Let's do this. And so we work really well together. And we've come a long way in the past year in really building this network to be what we want it to be and to stand out a little differently than some of the other like-minded agencies. So, there's some agencies that are dedicated to recovery and support services and some that are doing curriculum in schools. And our main focus, because of the connection to SAM and the place they have in the political arena, is to really give these stories a voice to legislators. And so it's taken a good year, but we've really evolved in accomplishing that, and we continue to grow.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and defer to Bronwen, let her pick it up where you left off there, Crissy, and then we'll go from there.
So I got involved in this space, the marijuana education and prevention and awareness space. Back in 2019, I came on with an organization that was called Parents Opposed to Pot with Julie Shower. And what had happened was I had spent 13 years in a certain county in Colorado where legalization really took over, really marketed to the kids. And one of my kids got kind of caught up in the rush, the green rush that was going on, and got kind of swept away and lost his way. Our family went through a lot because of it. And I knew I had to speak out, because at that point, my neighbors were just kind of patting me on the head and saying, just calm down, it's okay. And I'm like, no, this is not good. And started to learn more and more about what marijuana, especially youth use, can do with the cannabis use disorder. It is addictive, with cannabis-induced psychosis and a host of other ways that this drug, now superpowered, a lot different from what we knew in the 70s, though I used that and that was bad enough. So I knew I had to do something. I came on with Julie and slowly, thankfully, made my way to Parent Action Network. And I've been in from the beginning of Parent Action Network, not SAM. SAM was around before, I think, before I even knew that all of this existed. And so what we do is we educate, empower, and engage parents. Those are our 3 E's. And we teach you we bring in experts through webinars and through our newsletter, especially to teach parents the facts, science-based facts on this drug. And then that we empower them and engage them to go out and speak to legislators and community members and other people. That's the direction that we take, that kind of, as Crissy said, sets us apart from some of the other organizations. Due to our connection with Smart Approaches to Marijuana, we are able to do that well. I think that is about it, about how I got involved in this.
Yeah, you and I first met when I was on the board for Parents Opposed to Pot. Julie had asked me to be on the board, and then I think not too long after we met, or maybe right about that time, we were in the process of putting together an event that was going to be in DC, with the whole idea of bringing parents together who've been affected, or not just parents, but families, and who've been affected by marijuana somehow, by their child using marijuana, or another family member. And then COVID happened and everything sort of got derailed, and it was a really interesting time.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, but anyway, and so that's where you and I met, and as you know, it's probably come up a few times with my interviews with other people for this event, this summit, that my story, a little bit about my story and about Chase, and that's how I got started with all of this, was through initially it was prevention work, doing prevention work, and then I still do some prevention speaking, and my heart is really in prevention. I have moved on. I'm still, my mainstay right now is in other things, doing interventions and doing family recovery coaching, but I talk to people all the time. I talk to parents all the time whose primary problem with their child is marijuana or marijuana products, and it's not what people usually think of. It's not. Even parents today, you would think these new products with the higher THC potency have been around long enough that parents would understand by now, but people still think of marijuana as being this harmless, very low THC type of drug or product, and they don't realize what they're dealing with. So I do get calls from parents where their child is either in the middle of a psychosis, or has recently experienced a psychosis, or sometime in the not too distant past, they've experienced a psychosis related to their cannabis use, or they've had some other type of issue like cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. And that has come up. All of these types of issues have come up somewhat in through the course of this summit, and interviewing other people that just on their own brought it up, who are people who are professionals working in the treatment industry. And we weren't having a conversation about marijuana specifically, but it just comes up, So what other things, I brought up the CHS, the cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. If you want to speak to that, either one of you, I guess we'll go back to Crissy. If you want to speak to that, and that way I'll identify who to speak next, because I know it's kind of confusing for me to just throw the question out there, and then you have to figure out who's supposed to answer it, right? Crissy, why don't you address that issue, the CHS, cannabinoid hyperemesis, and also any other new issues? I know Delta 8 is another thing that's popped up recently. Why don't you address those two for parents?
Sure. So regarding CHS, what's really interesting is I came into this space as a prevention person in 2018, basically. So I came into this space with, I knew about CHS from a personal relationship. Someone in my family who was experiencing this after lifelong use. And this was back in 2014. Okay. So 10 years ago, we were having an issue, throwing up, stomach pains, all kinds of stuff, constant visits to the emergency room. Nobody knew what was going on. And again, this is 10 years ago with no drug use going on presently whatsoever, no marijuana use, nothing, right? But a lifelong user. We finally see a doctor who tells us, calls us up in the morning and says, I found something. And at that point, being in prevention, I was a researcher. This is now around 2018. I look up, he comes and he says, I think I found something. And he talks about this syndrome that started in New Zealand with chronic users of marijuana. And there were literally hundreds of studies. And so I brought it into my prevention work as a prevention educator in my county, because marijuana was now, being talked about becoming legalized, was becoming more prominent, was legalized in Colorado and a few other states at that point, and it was going to happen in New York. So it's really interesting to me that this has been around for quite some time, but nobody was talking about it. And now, because marijuana is legalized, everybody is talking about it. There are hundreds of cases on a daily basis across this country of CHS. That is what emergency rooms are seeing most. And Karen Randall just talked about that. Dr. Karen Randall actually just mentioned that on the recent episode of Dr. Phil, that she is working in an emergency room and can attest to the fact that this happens every single day. So CHS is a real thing. Nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to make an excuse that it's something else, but it's clearly related to today's high potency products and chronic use of these products, whether it be through smoking or edibles or whatnot. So no one really still knows the origin, but more and more doctors are studying it and learning more about it because it's a chronic problem. So besides the mental health effects, we have very serious physical health effects, and even with the lungs and the heart and so many other things that we're learning about as far as CHS. And then regarding the deltas, obviously these are products, well, it might not be obvious to everyone, but these are the products that fell through the loophole, right? They are not supposed to be psychoactive, which is THC is the psychoactive component of marijuana. But once they're heated to high temperatures and changed in laboratories, they become as potent as Delta 9 and sometimes more so. And there are thousands and thousands of other chemicals and chemical reactions going on within the products. So we don't even know what's happening in these products.
Right. Yeah. And you invited me. I came up with some other parents up to DC to advocate around that, primarily around that issue, the Farm Bill, which it leaves that loophole there for the cannabis industry to produce those products, those Delta 8 and some of the other Deltas, Delta 9, Delta 10, I guess it is,
Yep.
Yeah, and I do talk to parents a lot of times who are saying, and not just parents, other people who have an addicted loved one who will tell me, yeah, I first started hearing about it, as a matter of fact, on my call that I do for PAL, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. And someone came in and said, yeah, my husband or my child has been using Delta 8, and they're acting really weird. They're having some psychosis issues around that. And I'm like, really? Delta 8? What are you talking about? That was the first time I'd heard of it, And so yeah, it's relatively new, but it's been going on longer than people realize. Kind of like the CHS. Only the CHS goes back even farther, But go ahead, Bronwen.
Did anybody say what CHS was?
Yes, cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome.
But I mean, the cyclic vomiting, did we?
Oh, you mean
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we
Maybe
haven't
the
really
parents
given that.
it might be great for them to know, some of the signs so they could see it in their, if it's happening in their family, so they understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a little bit graphic to talk about, but there are worse things. But yeah, certainly there's the they get nausea, they get a lot of nausea around their marijuana use, And you can correct me or add to whatever I say here, but they get nauseous and they will begin to throw up. They cannot stop throwing up until they completely cease use, and sometimes they have to eliminate food items from their diet that may have cannabinoids in them.
Mhm.
Most people aren't aware of that there's foods that have cannabinoids in them that can set them off. And then they will get in a hot shower to relieve that nausea. Nobody really knows exactly. There's some theories on that, but exactly how that works. But that heat applied to their skin helps give them some temporary relief from the nausea. And sometimes they'll stay in hot shower so much that they will have burns,
Mhm.
like second degree burns, and they'll have scarring on their skin from that. It's really, really a terrible thing. There's also the driving issues that come up with marijuana, which is what affected our family. And I'm not as sharp on that. I'll be honest with you. I'm not as sharp on that as I once was because I've moved on to other things, but I do still talk on it a little bit. And there are some experts out there that I have that I'm connected to who can give you all the ins and outs of it. I'll just tell you that um, first of all, that if you have a child that is using marijuana, if they're a teenager, or if they're an adult and they are driving your car, you need to change that right away because had I not done that, my son was driving my car. I was insuring it. My name was on the title, and I changed that. And within a week or two after that is when the wreck happened. And so, I would have been liable. I could have been sued for the injuries to other people in that car. So, aside from the liability, obviously you don't want your child driving impaired because it's dangerous for them. It's dangerous for other people out there on the road. So that's one boundary that parents can set that's really important. So you have anything else, Bronwen, or do you have anything else around the driving issues or something you'd like to say to parents about
Yeah,
that?
so one of the things we'll hear a lot is I drive better when I'm on marijuana. It doesn't affect me. I have been in the car with someone who was using, it does affect them, and they don't think it affects them. Science is showing there's some good studies out there that it will slow down your reaction times. It affects your attention span. It's easy to become distracted. We have some handouts if anyone's interested. We have some one-pagers on how marijuana affects driving and the trouble they're having with testing. And one of the problems they have in collecting data is marijuana is fat soluble rather than water soluble. So it goes into your organs, it gets out of your bloodstream really quickly and gets absorbed into the lipid system in your body. And so when they get someone from an accident or a crash, excuse me, to the hospital and draw blood, 3 hours, 4 hours later, it looks like there's very little marijuana in their system. But so that test is not a good source of data collecting for finding out how marijuana is actually affecting our roads in the United States. A lot of studies are showing that it is making them more dangerous. There's one study that came out, I think 2019 was it, that talked about there would be an additional 6,800 traffic deaths every year in America if marijuana becomes federally legal. So it is definitely something science backed that it affects your driving ability and it is affecting our safety on the roads.
100. I personally feel like every day I pass a car with the windows open that you smell it and I kind of pull back. I don't want to be near that car, and it's enraging. And another problem with testing, of course, is that alcohol, very easy to test for. One molecule. Marijuana is hundreds of compounds. They don't even know how to do this. And then there is the other cultural issue in that if someone is smoking on the weekends and maybe 3 days later has an accident and has not been smoking, if you do a blood test or a hair follicle test, marijuana is going to be in that system. It might not have been a factor in that accident, you know? So there's that problem too in no one, you know, there are people that are going to smoke recreationally. States have made it legal. So where do you draw the line and how do you find out if it was a factor? So there's so many different factors with figuring out the best way to test for marijuana in the system when driving.
Yeah, I think there's a myth that a lot of people have bought into around that oh well, THC stays in your system for 30 days, so they can get a blood draw and they'll know if you were impaired, but they don't understand how all of that works. They know that you used sometime within the last 30 days, but they can't prove impairment in a court of law really unless they have that one metabolite and that is gone within about 2 hours after last use. And like you were saying, Bronwen, so it's a much more complicated thing for police to control. It's harder for them to get convictions in a court of law for a DWI when it's marijuana. They have a hard enough time with alcohol, be honest with you. But when you're talking about marijuana and other drugs, the threshold that they have to get past in terms of proof for the prosecutors and the police officers, it just goes way up. So it's very, very difficult to get convictions. So it is becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
Daryl,
go ahead.
One thing I was thinking that parents and drivers need to know, I think really it comes back to what Crissy was talking about with Delta 8, these extracts that have, or these intoxicating hemp products that have slid through on the Farm Bill loophole. They're available in gas stations. One of our PAN advocates actually found it in a dollar store in Houston, Texas. These products are widely available. They're not regulated. Your child can go in and get a snack at the store and eat it that has Delta 8. It is just as intoxicating as Delta 9. Some of it even has some Delta 9 in it. A lot of it does. It just, and they can still have the same problems, the same impairment that someone would going to a dispensary or going to their drug supplier and getting higher potency marijuana.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to bring up some of the other forms of marijuana. Maybe we can find a graphic to put up here for people too, but why don't we just talk a little bit about, and I don't mean find a graphic right now. I can insert one later if we need to, but why don't we just talk about a little bit about the different forms. So if a parent comes across something in their child's room that they're like, what is this? Maybe now they'll have some idea, because I think most parents still think of marijuana in the smokable form, like someone smoking a joint, or what's the other term I'm trying to think of here? A blunt, trying to smoke like they're smoking a joint or blunt or whatever. But there's so many different forms, and the potency levels change with these different forms. You have the wax extracts, you have the stuff like the shatter and the butter and the dabs and all of that. So if you could speak to that a little bit, I guess, Crissy, would you want to start with that?
Sure. And I have two really good graphics I can send to you from one of my.
You're welcome to share it too. Let's just do that. We'll put the graphic in later.
Okay. So you named them all really. And then of course there's edibles in the form of chocolate and snacks of every kind, sodas now, now there's alcoholic beverages mixed with cannabis products. So it's just pervasive. And of course, then we have the marketing to kids with that look like candy and Nerd Ropes and Doritos and Starburst and Skittles and whatnot, and Oreos and nachos and everything you can imagine. So it's really hard to know what to look for anymore. But even apparatus for using these products, like there's these, a lot of these are still hard to even recognize if it's something that is used for marijuana. I know that as an educator, I used to do a program where we made a mock teen bedroom and hid all kinds of paraphernalia on all drugs. And some of the things, like bongs can be made out of water. That still happens, of course, too, out of water bottles, by burning holes into it and everything. Apple cores, kids will find amazing ways to use these products. The dabs are usually, there's something called a dab rig, which kind of hard to miss something like that because you're not going to know what it is. It looks like a test tube and some curl, so like you're going to be like, what is this? But like the sticky residue in a little piece of plastic and things like that, the small pipes, like the glass pipes and everything, these are all things you should have your eyes open for where these products are concerned. The innards of cigarettes in the bottom of a garbage pail, that's a big one because they empty out the cigars. That's how you make a blunt, is by taking everything out of the cigar or most of it and filling it with marijuana. And now they have pre-rolls, which are already done for you. You can buy a whole box or bag of like pre-roll tubes for just filling with marijuana. And that is flower marijuana still,
Right.
So there are some people that still smoke flower, but most of these young kids are using the dabs and the butter and the shatter that look like earwax and honey and stained glass and that.
So, I mean, I'm trying to decide if I want to go down this rabbit hole or not, but there's the whole medical marijuana issue. Either one of you want to address that a little bit?
I think I can start, and maybe if you hear anything that I missed, Bronwen, you can chime in. I think the most important thing is, I just had a conversation with a parent about this, to understand about medical marijuana is there have been 3 FDA approved marijuana medicines for over 40 years. And you don't smoke these. They're in a pill or a capsule or a tablet type form, right? Maybe a tincture. The thing is, if you buy this, if you have a prescription, and these are for very specific conditions, cancer, childhood epilepsy, glaucoma. If you go to a drugstore in New York or Texas or North Carolina or Timbuktu with your prescription for one of those products to your drugstore and hand them that prescription, no matter where you are in this world, you're getting the same product, this same pill, the same dosage made for you. It's not going to be different here or there. In today's world, medical marijuana was just deployed to legalize marijuana. Medical marijuana is really no different than recreational marijuana. It's just being sold in a medical dispensary instead of a recreational dispensary, supposedly being regulated, but it's really not. Also, obtaining medical marijuana cards is as easy as checking a box on a website, which should really be illegal, but that's a whole other can of worms for sure. But plain and simple, kids are doing this regularly. There are also places that make fake medical marijuana cards. A lot of states have seen through that and controlled that to some degree, but it does happen. And so now, however you obtained it, you have a medical marijuana. And then, of course, there's the qualifying conditions issue, right? So there are some states that have 5 or 6 qualifying conditions. There are some states that have 10 to 20. And then there's New York and California and a couple of others that have, I have a hangnail, I'm going to go get my medical marijuana card. In all reality.
And you'll get it.
And you'll get it. You'll get it. Any qualifying condition. This includes pregnant women who are suffering from morning sickness. Anyone can make any excuse to go get medical marijuana card and go to a medical dispensary and get their products. Are they using that product to fix some condition? Science says not really. Data says not really. We all know that now, but this is about addiction for profit. So that is the biggest difference about medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. Overall,
I guess I would, sorry.
It was just a way to legalize a product so that everyone can use it without consequence for everything and anything.
Yeah.
And I guess I would have to ask, when was the last time you voted on a medicine? Some states make the decision themselves, but really whether something is a medicine or not should really go through the proper channels of people who are trained and understand how it reacts with the body, how it reacts with other medications, which is a big problem with what we call medical marijuana. A lot of the claims it makes, it really doesn't treat. And in some cases, it may seem to make it better, like anxiety at first, but eventually will cause worse anxiety. And I just wanted to, sorry.
I would just want to add to that as well, because you hit on it, Bronwen. Please tell me any other medicine in the world that cures everything.
I know, it's the miracle drug, right? And we have a really pretty good webinar. Daryl, I sent you the QR code that'll take everyone right to our web page on Learn About Sam, with Dr. Aaron Weiner, that talks about this. If a parent wants to learn more about it, that would be a really good place to start.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, when I start thinking about medicine, I try to avoid taking medicine and going to doctors as much as possible. I try to stay healthy, so I don't have to do that. The thing about medicine is, every time a doctor's written me a prescription, he's never written me a prescription says you can have as much of this as you want. There's no limit on the potency of the medicine. You could take, however many milligrams you want to take. There's specific instructions, and then I have to go get it refilled every so often. And that's not what happens with so-called medical marijuana. And then there's the whole, just you don't smoke it, right? Doctor has never written me a prescription for any medicine that I would smoke. So it just doesn't add up with it being medicine to me.
And Daryl, I think,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
I think that plays into, one of the things is that big marijuana plays in, is taking their plays directly from the tobacco playbook, the big tobacco playbook. And that's one of the things. Something new I learned, tobacco was prescribed as medicine. Doctors were using it as quote unquote medicine. And here we are again with marijuana. We all know what happened with tobacco, right?
That's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah. The only other thing that comes up for me a little bit is CBD, thinking about CBD a little bit. Is that, do you want to talk about that just a little bit, Crissy?
So I wouldn't consider myself the expert on CBD, but what I will say is that, again, it's unregulated. There's many unknowns about it, even though it is not something that causes a high. Nobody really knows exactly what it can benefit. And there are one or two products that are regulated. So one of the FDA regulated marijuana products is a CBD derivative. One is a THC derivative, and one I think is a combination of both. I'm pretty sure. In very specific quantities. So there is still, I think there's also the argument, honestly, that there may be medical benefits to marijuana, but we need years and years and years of more science and research, and we cannot ignore the thousands and thousands and thousands of families that have scientific evidence, reports from emergency rooms, medical records, and plain and simple, even if they have none of those things and they have their story, that it has to be recognized that this is not, that this is happening and that this is not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me how, Crissy, tell me how, tell the parents out there how they can get in touch with you, how they can get information about Penn and about Sam and all the organizations you're connected to there, but specifically about Penn.
Sure. So again, you can get us at, you can email us at pan@learnaboutsam.org or Crissy@learnaboutsam.org or Bronwen@learnaboutsam.org. We have a QR code with all our handouts that'll take you right to our webpage, which is part of the Smart Approaches to Marijuana website. And what I do want to say is that we welcome more and more parents to come to us. We take great pride. We are extremely compassionate, understanding, and feel very strongly about working with the families. There is never any judgment. Your story is not one we haven't heard. And it's actually the saddest thing in the world that we both have full-time jobs doing this, but we take it very seriously. And we really want to empower your voices and bring you to the Hill to lobby and advocate against these products and educate lawmakers and everything. And, again, our ultimate goal is to take prepared parents to the Hill, but to also give you the tools to do what you need to do in your own state, municipalities, and local neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I just want to speak to that just a little bit. That when you invited me and I came up to DC for that event, I was a little bit. How should I say this? I was a little bit.
You said skeptical in
I
your
was a little
letter.
skeptical. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. I was a little bit skeptical about what kind of impact I can have with these legislators, but I will say this, that the education piece of it was really good. The meeting the other parents piece of it was really good, and collaborating with them. And then when we all went there, you end up most of the time you're going to, and I knew this going into it, you end up talking to staffers, and they were very receptive. All of the ones that I talked to, they were very receptive to our message. They heard what we had to say. And I believe it will make an impact. And if nothing else, those young staffers who are in their 20s is going to make an impact with them. When they hear your story and they hear your concerns, you can see it in their facial expressions, in their eyes, that they're hearing everything you're saying, and you can see the concern there. So you can make an impact, and I would encourage any parent out there listening who has these issues to get in touch with this network.
So we don't hold our own meetings, but if we cross collaborate. So for instance, with someone like Laura Stack from Johnny's Ambassadors,
Okay.
a lot of parents come to us from her. Someone will write to her and say, I'm angry and yes, they become part of her group, but they say, but I want to speak to lawmakers. And she immediately says, then contact the Parent Action Network. I'm glad to have you in my group. We have support here. You'll hear like-minded stories, but they'll train you to speak to legislators. We'll have some parents say to us, that they're angry and they want to speak to legislators and work with us, but they also wish they had a support group. That's when we turn to you or Aubrey Adams or
Gotcha.
things like that. So cross collaboration, getting everyone the services they need, and meeting them, as Patrick Kennedy loves to say, where they're at, because in all reality, there is no pressure to do anything out of your comfort zone. If you're not comfortable speaking to a legislator, but you're comfortable signing on to an op-ed, so be it. So that's, once somebody joins our network, we usually meet with those people for 45 minutes, sometimes up to an hour and a half, hear their story, ask them questions about where they're at, and take it from there. And it really works. And we're growing and growing every week. There's not a week that doesn't go by. You don't interview.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could I piggyback two things?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Bronwen. Yeah.
One thing we're clear about, Crissy likes to point out, I still think we should be called the Family Action Network, but we're the Parent Action Network, which gives us a lot of good puns and everything for our newsletter, like Fantastic Shout Out and things like that, Pandemonium. But you don't have to be a parent. If you know someone, if you're a family member, or you yourself, suffered from, say, cannabis-induced psychosis or cannabis use disorder or anxiety, a drop in IQ, things like that, you're welcome to join us. And even if you haven't, we relish everybody who wants to come and help educate legislators, community workers, all kinds of stakeholders and decision makers. Whoever it is, your city manager, someone like that, please contact us. We're happy to work with everyone. Our stories are what really carry so much weight, and they need to be heard. I forgot the other thing I was going to say, but that's the main thing. So if you're not a parent, please just join us as well. The sad thing is, so many people don't understand what marijuana does, the impact of marijuana, until it happens to them. The industry has done a brilliant job of marketing and to commercialize and normalize this drug. We've been taught a lot of things that are partial truth or not true at all. And until it happens, until you see it, and understand it, most people don't want to get involved. But we are happy if you would like to get involved before it happens to you. We're here.
Yeah, I think you said earlier your 3 E's. I don't know if I'll get them right now. I think it was education, equipping, and empowering. Is that right?
Educate, empower, engage.
Engage. Okay. And yeah, so it sounds like, Crissy, if I've got it right, PEN is more about the education and then the advocacy work, but that if a parent has other needs for support and things like that, that you have resources, you have people out there you can direct them to. Is that accurate? Completely accurate. Okay. All right. Well, good. I would make sure that everybody gets your information. I think this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed getting to see both of you again, and hopefully we'll get to meet again in person soon and do some more work together.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, Daryl.
Pleasure to see you.
Thank you for tuning in to When God Intervenes. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more families in need of hope and healing. For more resources and support, visit our website at thefamilyrecoverycoach.com. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.